Chapter 1. We're downsizing. Hey, I'm still at the office, I said, tucking my phone between my shoulder and ear as I stared at the glowing spreadsheet on my monitor. Can I call you back in 10? There was a pause on the other end. Not the kind filled with background noise or impatience. This one felt deliberate, measured. No, my wife said. Her voice was smooth, professional. Not the voice she used when she asked what I wanted for dinner or complained about traffic. This won't take long. I straightened in my chair. Around me, the office hummed with the quiet grind of late hours, keyboards clicking, a printer coughing somewhere down the hall, the faint smell of burnt coffee that had been sitting on the warmer too long. I'd stayed late again, same as always. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was for us. Okay, I said. What's going on? She didn't answer right away. I could picture her perfectly. Sitting behind that massive glass desk, city lights behind her, legs crossed, expression composed. CEO posture. The one she practiced in the mirror. We're restructuring, she said finally, like she was reading from a memo. I frowned. Restructuring what? The company. A small laugh escaped me before I could stop it. You're calling me at 9:30 at night to talk shop? This is shop, she replied coolly. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I leaned back in my chair, rolling away from the desk, eyes drifting to the framed photo taped to my monitor, us, 3 years ago, smiling at a cheap beach resort, sunburned and happy, before boardrooms and power suits replaced Sunday mornings. All right, I said slowly. What does this have to do with me? Another pause. This one shorter, sharper. Due to downsizing, she said, today will be your last day. The words didn't land all at once. They floated, weightless, like they belonged to someone else. My last day? I repeated. At the firm? Yes. I let out a breath, half confused, half amused. You're firing me? Since when do you handle HR personally? This came from the top, she said. I opened my mouth to respond when she continued, her voice turning almost playful. Unless, she added, you want to stay on as a janitor. For a moment, all sound in the office disappeared. The hum, the clicks, the printer gone. My ears rang as if I'd been slapped. A janitor, I echoed. In the background, faint but unmistakable, came a burst of laughter. High-pitched, mocking. Her sister. I clenched my jaw. Is she with you right now? Another laugh, louder this time, closer to the phone. Oh, don't be so sensitive, my wife said. We're just being honest. You always said you'd do anything for this company, right? I looked down at my hands. They were rougher than they used to be, knuckle-scarred from years of fixing things myself instead of hiring help. I remembered weekends spent assembling furniture, setting up her home office, driving across town at midnight because she forgot a charger before a pitch. Is this a joke? I asked quietly. No, she said. This is business. Her sister chimed in, not bothering to hide her tone. I mean, it's kind of generous if you think about it. Not everyone gets to keep working after they are redundant. Redundant. I swallowed. You didn't mention this at dinner, or last night, or any of the nights I stayed up helping you prep those presentations. That was before, my wife said. Things change. People change too, I guess, I said. She ignored that. There's one more thing. I closed my eyes. Of course there is. Don't bother coming home, she said, as casually as if she were reminding me to pick up milk. The locks have been changed. For the first time, my breath hitched. Changed, I repeated. You locked me out of my own house. Our house, her sister corrected with a snicker. Well, mostly hers. I pictured the front door, the familiar scrape of the key, the way it sometimes stuck in winter. The coat rack I'd installed myself because she didn't like the one that came with the place. My chest tightened, sharp and hot. You could have told me, I said, face to face. That would have been awkward, my wife replied. This is cleaner. Cleaner. Like deleting a file. I pushed my chair back and stood, the motion sudden enough that a coworker glanced up from across the room. I turned away, lowering my voice. So that's it, I asked. You fire me, insult me, and throw me out over the phone? I'm offering you options, she said lightly. Some people would be grateful. Her sister laughed again. Seriously, pride is such a male thing. My fingers tightened around the phone. A dozen responses crowded my mind. Anger, disbelief, the urge to beg. to remind her of vows and years and sacrifices. I thought about raising my voice, about listing everything I'd done for her, for the company, for us. Instead, I took a slow breath. The office came back into focus. The lights, the hum, my reflection in the darkened window, older, tired, but still standing. "All right," I said. There was a flicker of surprise in her silence. "All right," she repeated. "Yes," I said evenly. "I hear you." Her tone sharpened. "So," I pictured her smirk, the one she wore in meetings when she thought she had the upper hand. "So," I said, "thanks for letting me know." "That's it," her sister scoffed. "Wow, guess we overestimated him." My wife exhaled, sounding almost disappointed. "I'll have security escort you out. You can drop off your badge at the front desk." "No need," I said. "I'll see myself out." I ended the call before either of them could speak again. The screen went dark, my own face staring back at me in the glass. Around me, work continued. No one knew my life had just been neatly dismantled in under 5 minutes. I picked up my jacket, slid my badge into my pocket. As I headed for the elevator, my phone buzzed once more. A text from her. "We'll talk later." I didn't reply. The elevator doors closed with a soft, final chime. I caught my reflection again, shoulders squared, expression calm, eyes darker than before. When the doors opened to the empty lobby, I stepped forward, phone still warm in my hand, and whispered to no one at all, "Thanks for the amazing offer." Inside, something breaks, and something else quietly awakens. Chapter 2, before the fall. Before the phone call. Before the laughter. Before the locks were changed. I keep going back to the beginning, like rewinding a tape that's already warped from overuse, hoping I'll catch the moment where everything tilted and never came back. We met in a place neither of us belonged. She was sitting alone at a bar near a conference hotel, still wearing her name badge, heels kicked off onto the stool. I was there waiting for a client who never showed. She glanced at my drink, then at me. "That's not a celebration drink," she said. "Neither is yours," I replied. She smiled then, warm, unguarded. The kind of smile that makes you lean in without realizing it. We talked for hours about nothing important. Dreams, mostly. Hers were sharp-edged and ambitious. Mine were quieter but steady. I liked the way she listened back then. I liked the way she asked questions. On our third date, she told me she wanted to run a company someday. "Not just manage," she said, tapping the table for emphasis. "Run it. Build something big." I laughed. Someone has to keep the wheels on while you conquer the world. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then don't go anywhere." I didn't. When her career started taking off, it felt like we were winning together. Promotions turned into longer hours into constant travel. I learned to pack her bags while she showered, to memorize flight numbers, to keep track of time zones. When she forgot to eat, I reminded her. When she doubted herself, I steadied her. "Couldn't do this without you," she used to say, leaning into me late at night, voice tired but sincere. I believed her. My own ambitions slowly shifted. I passed on opportunities that would have meant relocating. I turned down projects that conflicted with her schedule. It felt logical, temporary, like pausing my breath underwater, confident I'd come up eventually. Someone had to handle the invisible things. Bills, repairs, schedules. I was the one calling the plumber at midnight, the one negotiating insurance claims, the one smoothing over arguments before they became problems. Quiet competence doesn't announce itself. It just works. At first, she noticed. Then she expected it. Then she stopped seeing it at all. Her phone became an extension of her hand. It buzzed during dinner, during movies, during conversations that used to matter. She'd glance at the screen, lips tightening, then flip it face down. "Everything okay?" I'd ask. "Just work," she'd say. Always work. Sometimes she'd step into another room to take calls. Sometimes she'd lower her voice when I walked by. Once, I caught my name used like a formality in a conversation that didn't include me. "Yes, my husband will handle that," she'd said into the phone, waving me off when I raised an eyebrow. Like I was an assistant waiting for instructions. Corporate language crept into our marriage. She stopped saying we and started saying alignment. Problems became inefficiencies. Disagreements were emotional reactions. One night, halfway through an argument about a missed anniversary, She sighed and said, "Can we table this? I've had a long day. Table this." I stared at her. "You forgot our anniversary." She checked her watch. "And you're being dramatic." Her sister started showing up more after that. At first, it was casual, dropping by unannounced, staying for dinner, offering opinions that no one asked for. Then it became constant. Advice about business, about lifestyle, about me. "You're too soft on him," her sister once said, right in front of me, sipping wine like she was delivering wisdom. "Men need pressure. Otherwise, they stagnate." My wife laughed. "You might be right." I forced a smile. Glad we're all in agreement. The jokes sharpened over time. "Oh, he's the emotional one," she'd say at gatherings, hand resting lightly on my shoulder. I handle the real decisions. People laughed. I laughed too. It was easier than asking why it hurt. There were nights she came home buzzing with confidence, energy humming off her skin, eyes lit with something I didn't recognize. "Big meetings," she'd say. "Big players." She stopped asking about my day altogether. Once, half asleep, I reached for her in bed and felt her stiffen. "Not tonight," she muttered. "I'm exhausted." She rolled away, phone glowing softly in the dark. I watched the light flicker across her face, saw the small smile she didn't know I noticed. Missed anniversaries turned into forgotten birthdays. Promises became vague maybes. Every time I brought it up, she had a reason ready. "You knew what you signed up for. This is what success costs. Don't be insecure." Insecure. That word became her favorite weapon. Clean, dismissive, impossible to argue without proving her point. I started apologizing for things I hadn't done. For needing time. For wanting closeness. For existing in the margins of her life. One evening, after her sister left, I finally asked, "Do you still want this? Us?" She didn't look up from her laptop. "Why wouldn't I?" she said. "You're convenient." Convenient. She meant supportive. I told myself that. She had to. But convenience isn't love. It's utility. I see it now, in the way she corrected me in public, praised me in private less and less, spoke about our future like a corporate roadmap with exit options quietly built in. By the time she became CEO, something fundamental had already shifted. I was no longer a partner. I was infrastructure. Useful. Replaceable. And long before the phone call, long before the laughter, long before the locks were changed, the truth had already settled in like dust on forgotten furniture. This betrayal didn't start today. Chapter 3. The woman he married is gone. The car smelled like old leather and cold air. I reclined the seat as far as it would go, jacket folded under my head, eyes fixed on the fogged windshield. A street lamp flickered above me, its light pulsing like a tired heartbeat. I'd parked 3 blocks from the house, not because I planned to go back, but because I couldn't bring myself to drive farther away yet. Sleep came in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, her voice cut through the dark. "We're restructuring. Today's your last day." I shifted, the seat creaking under my weight. My phone sat on the passenger seat, screen black, silent. No missed calls. No apologies. No second thoughts. Just quiet. I laughed under my breath, a dry sound that surprised even me. "Fired," I muttered to the ceiling of the car. By my own wife. The word felt surreal. Fired meant paperwork, meetings, severance packages. This wasn't that. This was erasure. She hadn't just ended my job. She'd removed me from the equation entirely. I pulled the jacket tighter around myself, breath fogging again as the temperature dropped. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since morning. I ignored it. Hunger was familiar. This hollow feeling in my chest was not. Her words replayed, sharper now that I had nowhere to run from them. "You wouldn't understand how business works." She'd said it over dinner once, not even angry, just dismissive. I'd asked why a certain decision didn't make sense financially, something basic, something I thought we could talk through like we used to. She hadn't even looked up from her phone. "This is high-level strategy," she'd said. "You're thinking too small." I remembered how I nodded, embarrassed, like a child who'd asked a stupid question. Another memory surfaced, uninvited. I carry this marriage. That one had come during an argument. I'd suggested we take a weekend off, just us, no phones. She'd stared at me like I'd proposed burning money. "I'm the one with real pressure," she snapped. "I carry this marriage. Everything else is just Background support. Background. I'd cleaned the kitchen that night in silence, hands shaking as I scrubbed a spotless counter. I told myself she was stressed. I told myself she didn't mean it like that. Lying in the car now, I finally admitted the truth. She'd meant it exactly like that. A group of people passed by on the sidewalk, laughing loudly, arms wrapped around each other against the cold. I turned my head away, suddenly exhausted by the sight of closeness. My phone buzzed once. I grabbed it too fast, heart jumping, then stopped when I saw the notification. A calendar reminder. Board review prep, 8 o'clock a.m. I scoffed and dismissed it with a swipe. Old habits. Muscle memory from a life that no longer existed. Another phrase echoed, one I hadn't even registered as an insult at the time. Men like you should be grateful. Her sister had said it first, swirling wine in a glass, like she was making a point worth savoring. My wife hadn't corrected her. She'd smiled. Grateful. For what? For being tolerated? For being useful until I wasn't? I pushed the door open and stepped out of the car, stretching stiff legs. The cold bit immediately, sharp and honest. I welcomed it. It kept me present. I walked a few steps, hands shoved into my pockets, then stopped and looked back at the car. My temporary shelter. My exile. This was the part one hadn't prepared for. Not the loss of income or routine, but the sudden clarity. Every comment I'd brushed off. Every joke that landed just a little too hard. Every time she corrected me in front of others, talked over me, introduced me as an accessory instead of a partner. You're emotional, she'd say whenever I pushed back. You're overreacting. You're insecure. Words that made me smaller while she grew larger. I sat back down, elbows on my knees, staring at the cracked pavement. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who spoke without second-guessing, who believed effort was met with appreciation, who thought marriage was a shared weight. That man hadn't vanished overnight. He'd been chipped away at, sanded down, rebranded as support staff in his own life. The realization settled heavy and undeniable. She hadn't hesitated on the call. No tremor, no regret, just efficiency. That wasn't anger. That wasn't impulse. That was decision. I leaned my head back against the car door and closed my eyes, letting the truth finally settle into place. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that sinks in quietly and stays. The woman I married, who laughed easily, who asked my opinion, who held my hand like it mattered, was gone. And the woman who replaced her didn't see me as an equal, a partner, or even a husband anymore. She no longer respects him. Chapter 4, the other man, unseen but felt. I didn't need to see him to know he existed. His presence showed up in the negative spaces, in the pauses that lingered too long, in the way her attention slipped away mid-conversation, in the sudden confidence that clung to her like a new perfume. He was there in the excuses that didn't quite line up, in the calendar blocks marked busy that used to be shared dinners or quiet nights at home. It started with dinners. "I've got a corporate thing," she'd say, already halfway to the bedroom change. "Late one." "How late?" I'd ask, trying to sound casual. She'd shrug. "Depends." "Depends on what?" She never said. I'd sit at the kitchen table, laptop open but untouched, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock grow louder as the hours stretched. 10, 11, midnight, sometimes later. When she came home, she'd be energized instead of tired, heels dangling from her fingers, eyes bright. "Good night," I'd ask. "Productive," she'd reply, smiling to herself as she checked her phone. Productive wasn't the word she used before. Her confidence shifted too, hardened. She walked differently, spoke more decisively, cut people off mid-sentence without apology. At home, that edge didn't soften. It sharpened. One evening, I asked if she wanted to watch a movie. Something simple, familiar. She glanced at me like I'd interrupted a meeting. "I don't really have time for that stuff anymore." "That stuff?" I repeated. She sighed. "You know, idle distractions. Idle. Like I was." Her sister noticed the changes before I admitted them to myself. Or maybe she enjoyed noticing them. We were at a restaurant once, one of those places with overpriced plates and servers who recited specials like poetry. Her sister leaned across the table, eyes gleaming. "She's unstoppable lately," she said, nodding toward my wife. got a whole new level of focus. My wife smiled, lips tight. I've been aligning myself better. With the right people, her sister added pointedly. I felt the comment land, deliberate and heavy. The right people, I echoed. Sounds exclusive. Her sister smirked. That's how success works. Later in the car, I asked what she meant. You're reading into things, my wife said, adjusting the mirror. Not everything is about you. There was again that subtle distancing, that reminder of where I stood. Phone calls became guarded rituals. She stepped outside to take them, lowering her voice when she thought I was within earshot. Once, I heard her laugh, a soft, intimate sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Who was that? I asked when she came back in. Just a colleague, she said too quickly. You don't know him. The way she emphasized him stayed with me. I started noticing details I'd ignored before. New contacts saved under initials. Text deleted to save space. Her phone turned face down on every surface. Password changed. Notifications silenced. When I mentioned it, she smiled thinly. You're being paranoid. Her sister didn't bother with subtlety. At your age, she said one night over drinks, you either evolve or you get replaced. My wife laughed. That's brutal. That's reality. Her sister replied, eyes flicking to me. Business doesn't reward sentiment. I set my glass down carefully. Marriage isn't business. My wife tilted her head. Everything is business when there's something at stake. Something at stake, not someone. It hit me slowly, like pressure building behind the eyes. This wasn't about loneliness or attraction. This wasn't a secret romance built on stolen moments and whispered apologies. This was positioning. The dinners weren't dates, they were negotiations. The confidence wasn't passion, it was validation. Someone was reinforcing her sense of power, feeding the version of herself that saw people as assets and liabilities, including me. I remember a conversation from weeks earlier, one I brushed off at the time. You should think about contingency plans, she'd said casually while scrolling through emails. For what? I asked. She shrugged. Life. Careers change. People move on. People move on. I asked her once, point blank, is there someone else? She didn't flinch. That was the part that hurt most. You're projecting, she said. This is why men like you fall behind. Too emotional. Men like you. I saw it clearly then, not the man himself, but his function. He wasn't a lover hiding in the shadows. He was a ladder, a shield, a mirror that reflected her ambition back at her without questioning the cost. And she had already stepped on me to reach higher. The contempt slipped through in moments she didn't bother to hide. Eye rolls, sighs, the way she spoke about me to others like I wasn't in the room. He's struggling with the changes, she'd say. It's hard for him to keep up. Keep up with what? Being replaced? The affair, whatever shape it took, wasn't fueled by desire. It was fueled by strategy, by ego, by the belief that she had outgrown me and deserved more. And worse, she believes he's finished. Chapter 5, Silence is a Weapon. I didn't confront her. That surprised even me. The night after everything settled into its new, uglier shape, I sat alone in a 24-hour diner off the highway, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt regret. Neon lights buzzed overhead. A waitress refilled my cup without asking, eyes kind but uninterested. I could have driven back to the house, pounded on the door, demanded explanations. I could have flooded her phone with questions, accusations, pleas. I did none of it. Silence felt unnatural at first, like holding my breath underwater. Every instinct told me to fight for my place, to argue my value, to remind her of what she was throwing away. But another instinct, older, quieter, told me something different. Never argue with someone who's already decided you're beneath them. So I went quiet. When my phone buzzed with a message from her the next morning, we need to discuss logistics. I read it, then set the phone face down on the table. No response. When her sister sent a thinly veiled jab, hope you're handling things like an adult, I deleted it without replying. The silence unsettled them. I could feel it even without seeing their faces. For me, the quiet did something else. It cleared the noise, gave old thoughts room to resurface. I thought about the people I hadn't spoken to in years. The ones who used to call me first when something broke, when a deal stalled, when a problem needed solving without ego attached. The ones who'd watch me step back so my wife could step forward. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through contacts like I was flipping through an old photo album. There were names there she'd forgotten, people who hadn't. I made the first call from my car, parked outside a public library with free Wi-Fi. It rang twice. "Well, I'll be damned," a familiar voice said. "If it isn't the man who disappeared." "Didn't disappear," I replied. "Just got quiet." He chuckled. "That tracks. What do you need?" We talked for 20 minutes. About the market, about shifts in leadership, about rumors I hadn't heard because I'd been busy playing support system instead of strategist. When I hung up, my chest felt lighter. I made another call, then another. Some conversations were cautious at first. "Didn't you work for your wife now?" one former client asked. "Past tense," I said simply. There was a pause. Then, "Her loss." That phrase came up more than once. I took notes, real notes, on a yellow legal pad I bought for $2. Names, timelines, quiet frustrations people had with her company's aggressive expansion, her scorched earth leadership style. Bridges burned, deals rushed, allies alienated, patterns emerged. So did opportunities. I wasn't weak. I'd just been underestimated by her circle, by anyone who mistook my restraint for lack of spine. I'd let them. It was easier at the time. Easier than insisting on being seen. That era was over. A rival company kept coming up in conversations. Smaller, hungrier, smarter in the ways that mattered. I remembered their founder, sharp, patient, allergic to ego. We'd clashed once years ago over a contract and parted with mutual respect. I dialed his number. He answered himself. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. I smiled for the first time in days. "You heard. Hard not to," he replied. "When a CEO fires her own husband, people talk." "I'm not calling to gossip," I said. "Good," he replied. "Neither am I." We met a few days later in a nondescript office park, the kind of place no one noticed and everyone underestimated. He poured coffee himself. No assistants. No theatrics. "I always thought you were the real brain behind some of her early wins," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You never took credit." "I didn't need to," I replied. "At the time." He nodded. "Timing is everything." We talked strategy. Quietly. Carefully. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were projections, valuations, pressure points. Numbers that made my pulse slow and steady instead of spike. "This is ambitious," I said. "This is precise," he corrected. "And it's already in motion." I flipped a page and froze. 500 million. I looked up. "You're serious." "I don't bluff," he said. "And I don't chase deals I can't close. But I need someone who understands how she thinks. Someone who knows where the bodies are buried. Metaphorically. I closed the folder, fingers resting on the cover. "You're asking me to betray her." He shook his head. "No. I'm asking you to stop protecting someone who wouldn't do the same for you." I didn't answer right away. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and went unanswered. Finally, I said, "What's your timeline?" He smiled, slow and knowing. "Sooner than she expects." When I left, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused. Word spread quietly, not loudly enough to reach her yet, but enough to draw interest. Conversations happened behind closed doors. Emails were sent and unsent. Numbers adjusted. Lawyers looped in with discretion. I stayed silent publicly. No social media posts. No vague quotes. No hints. Let them assume I was licking my wounds. At night, I slept better. The ache was still there, but it had direction now. Purpose. One evening, my phone buzzed again. Her name lit up the screen. I watched it ring, then go silent. Silence isn't emptiness. It's space. And space is where things move. A rival company emerges. A deal is whispered about. And a $500 million negotiation begins moving behind the scenes. Chapter 6, The Meeting Room. The conference floor smelled like polished wood and quiet money. She stepped out of the elevator with practiced confidence, heels clicking in a steady rhythm that announced authority before she ever spoke. Power suit. Perfect tailoring. Hairpinned just loose enough to suggest effort without vulnerability. She adjusted her watch, an unconscious gesture, and glanced at her sister, who walked half a step behind her like a loyal shadow. 5 minutes early, her sister said. They'll appreciate that. They always do, she replied, lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. This deal mattered. Everyone knew it. $500 million didn't just shift numbers, it rewrote standings. Boards would shuffle. Careers would be sealed. She'd already rehearsed the opening remarks in her head, crisp and confident, the way she liked them. The doors to the meeting room stood open. Inside, sunlight spilled across a long glass table, illuminating leather chairs and neatly stacked folders. A few executives were already seated, murmuring quietly. At the far end sat the rival CEO, calm, unreadable, hands folded like he had all the time in the world. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. Competition sharpened her. Always had. She stepped forward. Then she saw him. He sat 2 seats to the rival's right, posture relaxed, jacket off, sleeves rolled just enough to look intentional. No nervous tapping. No forced smile. He looked settled, like someone who belonged exactly where he was. For half a second, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. Then her sister stopped walking. The room seemed to tilt. He lifted his eyes and met hers, not with anger, not with triumph, but with calm recognition. The kind that said, I knew this moment would come. Her breath caught, just barely, enough for him to notice. She recovered quickly. She always did. A laugh slipped out of her, light and controlled, as if she'd stumbled onto an amusing coincidence rather than a fault line opening beneath her feet. Well, she said, scanning the room like she was reassessing a chessboard. This is unexpected. Her sister leaned in, whispering sharply, What is he doing here? She didn't answer. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and walked to the table, taking her seat at the head as if nothing had changed, as if the past hadn't just materialized in front of her, composed and unafraid. Good morning, she said to the room. Shall we begin? The rival CEO inclined his head. Of course. But first, introductions. Her fingers tightened around her pen. He spoke before anyone else could. Already familiar, he said smoothly. But it's been a while. A few heads turned, curious. She forced a smile. Small world. Not really, he replied. Just well planned. Her sister bristled. Excuse me. The rival CEO raised a hand gently. Let's keep this professional. Professional. The word rang hollow. She opened her folder, scanning numbers she'd already memorized, buying herself a moment. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She hadn't anticipated this variable. Not him. Not here. She looked up again, meeting his gaze directly now. So, she said, voice cool. You work here now? He smiled. No, I own the leverage. The words landed without force, and that's what made them devastating. Silence spread across the table. Not awkward, attentive. Her sister let out a sharp breath. That's not funny. He didn't look at her. The rival CEO leaned back, studying my wife with new interest. He's being literal. She felt the control she'd spent years cultivating begin to slip, like silk sliding through her fingers. She searched his face for cracks, for resentment, bitterness, some emotional tell she could exploit. There was nothing, only certainty. You didn't think this would be so simple, he said quietly. Did you? Her jaw tightened. If you're here to posture, I'm here to listen, he replied. Same as you. Her pen snapped between her fingers. Around them, executives shifted uncomfortably. Someone cleared their throat. A glass of water went untouched. She tried to recalibrate. This was still her arena. She'd survived worse than this. But something was different. He wasn't reacting to her. He wasn't chasing approval or recognition. He wasn't defending himself. He didn't need to. The rival CEO slid a document across the table toward her. Perhaps you'd like to review the updated terms. She glanced down and felt her stomach drop. Clauses rewritten. Power redistributed. Assumptions overturned. She looked back up at him, finally letting the mask crack just enough for disbelief to show. You knew, she said. He met her stare evenly. You taught me how people move when they think they're untouchable. For the first time, she has no control. Chapter 7, Public Collapse. The room didn't explode. It unraveled. slowly, methodically, in full view of everyone who mattered. The first sign was the silence from her side of the table. Not the strategic kind, the kind that meant calculations were failing to resolve. She flipped through the revised documents again, jaw tightening with each page. Numbers she'd expected to anchor the deal were now conditional. Assumptions she'd built forecasts on had been quietly dismantled. This wasn't disclosed in preliminary discussions, she said, keeping her voice level. The rival CEO folded his hands. It was just not where you were looking. Her sister leaned forward, irritation sharpening her tone. You can't seriously expect us to accept terms rewritten at the last minute. He glanced at his watch. These terms were finalized weeks ago. That's impossible, her sister snapped. You would have known, he finished calmly, if you still had full visibility. A murmur rippled down the table. Her board members, 3 of them seated along the wall, shifted in their chairs. They'd arrived confident, already discussing post-deal headlines in hushed tones. Now, they exchanged looks that carried a very different weight. She straightened. Let's be clear, she said. My company doesn't operate in the dark. He finally turned to look at her fully. No, he said. It operates on momentum. And momentum has a blind spot. She opened her mouth to respond, then stopped. Because the rival CEO slid another folder across the table. This one thinner, heavier in implication. Before we proceed, he said, there's something the board should see. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then to her board chair. That won't be necessary. It is, the chair replied, voice cautious now. Open it. She hesitated just a fraction too long. The chair reached over and opened it himself. Inside were timelines, communications, strategic shifts mapped against internal decisions only a handful of people were privy to. Not leaks, not espionage, insight. Her breath went shallow. This analysis, the chair said slowly, identifies risk exposure we were never briefed on. She shook her head. That's out of context. The rival CEO didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. One of the other board members spoke up. These projections assume our exclusivity clauses were compromised months ago. Her sister scoffed. That's absurd. He turned a page. Then explained this. Dates, counterparties, legal language tightened just enough to shift leverage without triggering alarms. Her eyes darted once to him. He met her gaze calmly. Someone on her side whispered, how would they even know this? The answer hung in the air, obvious and unbearable. The rival CEO finally spoke again. All information provided was obtained legally, through due diligence, through market behavior, and through people who understood how your organization truly functions. Her board chair looked at her now, not angry, not accusatory, concerned. You told us our internal cohesion was strong, he said, that no one outside the executive tier had strategic clarity. Her mouth opened, closed. Across the table, her sister's confidence faltered. The smug posture collapsed inward, hands folding tightly together. This is turning into a circus, she muttered. We should pause. No, the chair said. We should understand. The rival CEO nodded once. The deal, as structured, assumed your company was the dominant force. That assumption is no longer supported. A quiet gasp escaped someone near the end of the table. She felt heat crawl up her neck. You're overstating, I'm quantifying, he replied. There's a difference. She turned to her board, searching for backup for the familiar alignment she'd relied on for years. What she found instead was distance. One member leaned back, arms crossed. Another avoided her eyes entirely. The chair spoke again. Why weren't we informed about the internal attrition risk? She swallowed. Because it wasn't material. The rival CEO tilted his head. It was. You just didn't see it. Her sister shot him a glare. And you did. No, he said. He did. All eyes moved to him. He didn't shift. Didn't gloat. Didn't speak. He didn't have to. Her chest tightened as the realization landed fully, brutally clear. This wasn't a surprise attack. It was a demonstration. Everything she dismissed. Everything she'd minimized. Every time she'd assumed silence meant irrelevance. The board chair closed the folder. We need to reconsider our position. Her voice cracked, just barely. You're not serious. I am, he said. This deal carries more risk than we were led to believe. Her sister stood abruptly. This is sabotage. The rival CEO raised an eyebrow. It's consequence. The room buzzed now. Low voices, whispered recalculations, assistants stepping out to take calls. The clean certainty she'd walked in with had evaporated, replaced by scrutiny. She looked at him again. Really looked. Not as the man she'd fired. Not as the husband she'd dismissed. But as the variable she'd failed to account for. The one who'd known where to apply pressure without ever touching the surface. The one who understood the architecture of her empire because he'd helped build its foundation, and then stepped away quietly enough for her to forget. Her fingers curled into her palm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about exposure. She sat back slowly, the weight of it all settling in. She didn't just betray her husband. She betrayed the wrong man. Chapter 8. Begging sounds different when power is gone. The first call came at 1:17 a.m. I was awake, sitting at the small desk in the short-term apartment I'd rented. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet mind. Papers were spread out in neat stacks, a laptop open but idle. Outside, the city breathed in low, distant sounds. Traffic far away, a siren fading, someone laughing on a balcony they thought no one else could hear. My phone lit up on the desk. Her name. I stared at it until the screen dimmed and went dark. A minute later, it lit up again. I didn't answer. The third time, she didn't let it ring. A voicemail notification appeared instead. I waited another 10 minutes before pressing play. Her voice was different. Not polished. Not sharp. Stripped down to something thin and uneven. "We need to talk," she said quickly, like she was afraid the words might run away if she didn't grab them fast enough. Today didn't go the way it was supposed to. There are things you don't understand. Please call me back. Please. That word echoed longer than it should have. I set the phone down and went back to my notes. Numbers. Timelines. Options. Control didn't come from volume. It came from patience. At 2:04 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A text this time. "You can't do this." I almost smiled. At 2:11, "You owe me a conversation." There it was. Familiar. Reflexive. Power muscle memory, firing even as the ground collapsed beneath her. I didn't respond. The next evening, the calls started earlier. She didn't leave voicemails this time. Just kept calling, letting it ring longer with each attempt, like persistence could substitute for authority. When I finally answered, I did it without ceremony. "Hello." She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath the entire day. "There you are." I leaned back in my chair. "You called." A pause. I could hear movement, footsteps, maybe glass clinking. She wasn't in the office. That alone told me more than she realized. "We need to talk," she said again, slower now. "Privately." "We are." "This isn't funny," she snapped, then caught herself. Her voice softened immediately. "I didn't mean look, things escalated. There were misunderstandings." "Were there?" I asked calmly. "Yes," she said quickly. "You blindsided me." I waited. "You embarrassed me," she added, "in front of my board." I pictured the meeting room. The way her confidence had cracked, just slightly, when certainty failed her. I said nothing. "We built this together," she said, and now there was something else in her voice, urgency edged with fear. "You can't just tear it down. Built this together." I rolled the phrase around in my head. All the nights she'd dismissed me. All the decisions she'd made without me. All the moments I'd been convenient instead of valued. "Interesting," I said. "You didn't say that when you fired me." Her breath hitched. "That was different," she said. "That was business. And this isn't." Silence stretched between us. Not the kind she used to wield. The kind that pressed in demanding answers. "Finally," she said, "you owe me." There was again. The old script. I closed my eyes briefly, not out of pain but clarity. "I don't owe you anything." "Yes, you do," she insisted. "You wouldn't even be in this position without me. I brought you into that world." I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "You brought me into proximity, not relevance." Her voice shook now. "You're being vindictive." "No," I said evenly. "I'm being accurate." Another pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, the edge was gone entirely. "I'm scared," she said quietly. The admission landed heavier than any accusation. Not because it moved me, but because it confirmed everything. What do you want? I asked. To fix this, she said. To make it stop. The board is questioning me. Deals are on hold. People are circling. I pictured her sister, suddenly silent. The advisors who'd once nodded at everything she said, now asking for documentation. Accountability had a way of changing the room temperature. You can help, she said. You know you can. I'll let the silence answer first. Then I said, you fired me. Remember? She didn't respond right away. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't think you'd fight back. There it was. The core of it. Not regret. Miscalculation. I didn't fight, I said. I adapted. She swallowed audibly. We can talk this through. Just you and me. Like before. There is no before, I replied. You made sure of that. Please, she said. Just tell me what you want. I looked around the room. The clean lines, the quiet order, the sense of direction I hadn't felt in years. I want you to understand something, I said. This isn't about punishing you. Then what is it about? She asked desperately. Consequences. She was quiet for a long time. I never thought you'd be capable of this, she finally said. That's because you stopped looking, I replied. Her breath trembled. So that's it. Yes. I ended the call gently, without slamming the phone down, without a final cutting remark. Just a clean disconnect. I sat there for a moment afterward, listening to the silence settle back into place. Now she is the one afraid. He listens calmly. You fired me. Remember? No yelling. No revenge theatrics. Just earned dominance. Chapter 9. Choosing dignity over destruction. The choice didn't arrive with drama. No thunder. No raised voices. No final showdown across a polished desk. It came quietly, the way real decisions do, sitting alone in a room with a glass wall overlooking the city, papers spread out in front of me, the future waiting patiently for an answer. I could end her. That was the truth. I kept circling. The mechanisms were already in motion. The rival company's legal team had mapped out contingencies with clinical precision. One additional disclosure here. One accelerated filing there. Nothing illegal. Nothing reckless. Just pressure applied at exactly the wrong points for her to recover. A slow bleed. Her board would lose confidence entirely. Lenders would tighten terms. Executives would defect. The company she'd wrapped her identity around would collapse inward, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but headlines and postmortems. She'd be ruined. The man across from me, my new partner, studied my face carefully. He was patient like that. You don't have to decide today, he said. Yes, I replied. I do. He nodded once. If you want push, we can. The opening is there. I looked down at the final contract on the table. My name sat cleanly at the bottom of the page. No qualifiers, no shadows. Ownership, authority, independence. Everything she'd told me I didn't have. Everything she'd laughed about. I thought about the last time I'd seen her truly confident. Not the performative kind she wore now, but the early days when ambition still had curiosity attached to it. Before contempt became her default posture. Before power became a substitute for character. Destroying her would be easy. Walking away would be harder. I picked up my pen, then set it down again. What happens to her company if we stop here? I asked. He leaned back. It survives. Barely. She won't be able to dominate the market the way she planned. She'll lose board support, control, narrative. And her position? He hesitated. Unstable. Not destroyed. Not saved. Exposed. I nodded slowly. That felt right. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't need to look to know who it was. She'd been calling more frequently now. Less anger, more urgency. Messages that tried different tones like keys on a ring. Please, this is bigger than us. We can still fix this. I turned the phone face down. The partner across from me followed the movement. She's been reaching out? Yes. And I'm not interested in closure, I said. I'm interested in distance. He smiled faintly. That's rare. So, is restraint, I replied. I signed a contract. The pen moved smoothly, decisively. No hesitation. When I finished, I slid the document back across the table. Finalize it, I said. As written. He picked it up, scanning the signature even though he didn't need to. You're sure? Yes. He studied me for a moment longer, then extended his hand. Congratulations. I shook it firm and brief. No triumph, just alignment. While I left the building, the city felt different. Not smaller, clearer. The noise didn't press in the same way. People hurried past, chasing things they believed would make them whole. I walked without rushing. Later that evening, I met with my attorney to confirm the last details. She flipped through her notes, impressed despite herself. You could have taken more, she said. Legally speaking. I know. Why didn't you? I thought about it for a moment. Because then I'd still be reacting to her. She nodded, understanding immediately. On my way home, my phone rang again. I answered this time. Yes, I said. Her voice came through brittle, strained, stripped of the authority she used to wear like armor. They're calling an emergency board meeting. I assumed they would. You did this, she said, not accusing, stating. I allowed the truth to surface, I replied. What they do with it isn't my concern. A sharp breath. You could stop it. No, I said gently. I could delay it. There's a difference. Her voice cracked. You're really going to let everything fall apart? I leaned against the railing outside my apartment, watching traffic move below in steady lines of red and white. I'm going to let it become what it actually is. You said you loved me, she whispered. I did, I said. That's why I'm not destroying you. Silence swallowed the line. After a long moment, she said, What am I supposed to do now? I closed my eyes briefly. Figure out who you are without leverage. I ended the call before she could respond. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. Not because I'd won, because I'd chosen myself. In the days that followed, the headlines came. Not catastrophic, controlled. Analysts questioned leadership. Investors pulled back. Her sister vanished from public view entirely. The laughter stopped. I didn't watch closely. I had my own work now. My own direction. A future built on something sturdier than proximity to power. She lost the company's momentum. She lost the board's confidence. She lost the image she'd used to define worth. And I lost nothing I couldn't replace. I didn't save her company. I didn't destroy it either. I walked away intact. She loses everything she mocked him for lacking. Chapter 10, The Lesson. The apartment was quiet. Not empty exactly. Not lonely. Quiet in the way that follows storms, when the wind has passed, but the air still carries the weight of what happened. Papers, folders, and a carefully organized laptop sat on the desk. A small stack of unopened letters, some work, some irrelevant, rested neatly in a corner. I poured a glass of water and leaned against the countertop, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, and the pulse of the city that had watched so much of my life collapse and rebuild. I was alone. Fully, finally. The first night, I slept without looking over my shoulder. I realized how heavy her presence had been, even in absence. Not physically, not emotionally in the sense of warmth or love, but as a gravitational force, pulling me toward reactions, toward anger, toward resentment. That weight was gone now. I poured another glass of water and walked to the balcony, city lights stretching into the horizon like stars fallen to earth. I thought of her, of all the meetings she had dominated, all the nights I had bent around her schedule, all the times I had swallowed my own pride for hers. She had laughed at my caution, sneered at my patience, and dismissed my loyalty as weakness. Yet patience had been my weapon. Loyalty had been my strategy, and silence, silent, methodical, unshakable, had become my armor. I thought back to the first time I had understood the other man's presence, the subtle shifts, the whispered advantages she had sought in his company. I had felt powerless then, cornered, blindsided. But that powerless moment had been a lesson, not in vengeance, not in rage, but in restraint, observation, and timing. I smiled faintly, recalling her voice, the trembling, desperate tone on the late-night calls. I didn't answer. I didn't plead. I didn't gloat. I simply waited, let the truth run its course, and let her confront the reality she had ignored for so long. That the man she had believed she could manipulate, the man she had fired, the man she had mocked, he was untouchable now, not because he sought power, but because he had built it quietly, deliberately under the radar. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was my attorney, carrying the final confirmations for the $500 million deal. She handed me the folder, smiling with the sort of restrained approval that only people who've seen you endure and adapt can offer. "You did it," she said. "I didn't just do it," I replied. I didn't let her define the terms. Or me. She nodded, placing the folder on the desk. "That's rare. Most people in your position would have let anger drive them, lose perspective." "Perspective," I said, running a finger across the edge of the folder, "is everything." We sat together for a while, reviewing the final numbers, the final clauses, the final implications. The deal was done, secure, and built on integrity and strategy, not manipulation. I realized, as we spoke, how much I'd learned, not just about business, but about human behavior, resilience, and the quiet power of self-respect. Later, alone again, I stood by the window, letting the city hum beneath me. I thought about the past decade, the sacrifices I had made, the late nights, the arguments, the small humiliations I had endured. I had once thought those sacrifices were for her, for our life together. Now I knew they had been for me, for my growth, my understanding, my ability to weather storms and emerge unbroken. A message pinged on my phone. I glanced at it. It was her. Short, clipped, hesitant. "We need to talk." I didn't reply, not because I lacked desire for confrontation, not because I was weak, but because silence now carried more weight than any argument I could make. Because my life, my dignity, and my future were intact, and no apology, no explanation, no manipulation could change that. I remember the nights she had belittled me, the casual remarks, the jokes disguised as confidence. "Men like you should be grateful. You wouldn't understand how business works. I carry this marriage." Each one had once cut, sharp as a knife. Now, those words were relics of her hubris, reminders not of my inadequacy, but of her misjudgment. I walked to the small bookshelf and picked up a book I had never finished, placing it gently on the desk. The room smelled faintly of coffee and paper, simple, grounding, real. I poured another glass of water, sat back in the chair, and allowed the stillness to fill me. Winning had never been about revenge. It had never been about destruction. It had been about choice, choosing patience over impulsiveness, dignity over retaliation, clarity over chaos. The irony was beautiful. She had sought power through manipulation, ambition, and deceit, and in the end, it had been her own making that left her exposed. I had simply waited, built quietly, and acted with precision. Outside, the city lights flickered like tiny witnesses to my journey. I felt the pulse of life, steady and unwavering, beneath me. I thought about the lessons I had learned. Strength does not roar. It whispers. Loyalty is not weakness. It is clarity. Patience is not passivity. It is foresight. I smiled faintly, not smugly, not arrogantly, just quietly because finally I could. The phone buzzed again. Another call from her. Another plea. Another chance to respond. I set it aside. There was nothing left for me to say. The narrative had shifted. She had lost the tools she once wielded to control me. Her voice, once commanding, now trembled like a leaf in the wind. I poured myself another glass of water and sipped slowly, enjoying the cool calm. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable, not because I was above the world, but because I had rebuilt myself on solid ground, unshakable and clear. The night stretched on, quiet, steady, unbroken. No screams, no tears, no desperate bargaining. Just the hum of a city, the faint rustle of paper, the presence of a man who had reclaimed himself. I let the silence speak. Let the calm settle. Let the lesson linger. And in that quiet triumph, I thought of her one last time, not with rage, not with longing, but with the sharp, calm clarity of understanding. She thought loyalty was weakness until she learned what happens when you mistake patience for power.